The conference room felt like it was closing in. Arlington Gates, my VP, leaned forward with that smile he reserved for moments when he thought he was being brilliant. Across the mahogany table sat Harrison Whitlock, the investor who could make or break careers with a single phone call. I was mid-sentence, explaining our quarterly projections for the Dominion Capital portfolio, when Arlington cut me off. "I apologize for the interruption, Harrison." Arlington's voice dripped with manufactured concern. "Before we continue, there's something you should know. Jasper here is being released from the firm today, effective immediately." The room went silent. Harrison's posture changed instantly. He went rigid, his fingers stopping mid-tap on his leather portfolio. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Welcome to the Corporate Vault channel, where we unpack the stories that happen behind closed doors in corporate America. The moments that change careers, the decisions that reshape lives, and the justice that sometimes finds its way through the cracks of the system. If you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or deliberately sabotaged at work, you're in the right place. We're building a community here, a space where these stories matter. Help us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button and join others who understand that corporate life isn't always what it appears to be on the surface. Now let me tell you who I am and how I ended up in that conference room, watching my career supposedly implode in front of the most powerful investor in commercial real estate. My name is Jasper Kendal. At the time, I was 34 years old, a senior investment analyst at Dominion Capital Group, one of the top 3 private equity firms specializing in commercial real estate on the East Coast. I came from a middle-class family in Ohio. My father was a high school teacher, my mother a nurse. They taught me something that money can't buy: empathy, the ability to see people as human beings first, not just stepping stones or obstacles. That quality, that deep-rooted understanding that everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about, shaped how I moved through the world. It made me different at Dominion, not weaker, different. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to how this all started. 6 months before that conference room ambush, I joined Dominion Capital Group with a stellar track record. I'd spent 8 years at 2 smaller firms, building a reputation for identifying undervalued properties in secondary markets. My analysis had generated over $200 million in returns for my previous employer. Dominion recruited me aggressively, 3 rounds of interviews, a compensation package that made my wife, Catherine, actually gasp when I showed her the offer letter. The promise of working with the best minds in commercial real estate investment. Arlington Gates was my direct supervisor. 47 years old, Yale MBA, 3rd-generation wealth, and a handshake that felt like he was trying to crush your bones to establish dominance. He had that particular brand of arrogance that comes from never having failed at anything that mattered to him personally, because family money always provided a safety net. Our relationship started professionally enough. He gave me the standard orientation, walked me through Dominion's investment thesis, introduced me to the team. But I noticed things, small things at first. The way he spoke to Julie, his administrative assistant. The dismissive tone he used when our junior analyst, Timothy, asked questions. The fact that he took credit for team wins in partner meetings but deflected blame onto specific individuals when portfolios underperformed. I kept my head down. New job, probationary period, learning the systems. I told myself it wasn't my place to judge leadership styles. Then came the Riverside portfolio. Dominion had acquired a struggling multi-property commercial portfolio in 3 mid-sized Midwestern cities. 12 buildings total, mixed-use spaces, office and retail. The previous ownership group had over-leveraged, and we'd picked it up at a significant discount during a refinancing crisis. Arlington assigned it to me. "Fix it or liquidate it," he said. 6 months, show me what you've got, Kendal. I dove deep, spent 3 weeks on site across the 3 cities. I didn't just review financials and occupancy reports. I walked every building, talked to every property manager, met with current tenants and business owners in the surrounding areas. What I found wasn't a real estate problem. It was a relationship problem. The previous ownership group had been absentee investors who treated the properties purely as extraction vehicles. They'd raised rents aggressively, deferred maintenance, ignored tenant concerns. The buildings weren't failing because of location or market conditions. They were failing because nobody had treated them like communities. I developed a plan. Instead of flipping the properties quickly or converting them to different uses, I proposed a 18-month repositioning strategy. We'd invest in deferred maintenance first, building trust. Bring in local small business consultants to help struggling retail tenants improve their operations. Restructure some leases to graduated rent increases tied to revenue performance. Create shared marketing initiatives that benefited all tenants in each building. It was unconventional. Most private equity plays focus on quick optimization and exit. But my analysis showed that these properties, in these specific markets, would generate significantly higher long-term returns if we stabilized the tenant base and built reputation as landlords who actually cared about community impact. Arlington hated it immediately. "We're not a charity, Kendal," he said when I presented the strategy. "Our investors expect returns, not feel-good stories about helping mom-and-pop businesses." "The returns are better with my approach," I countered, walking him through my financial models. 12 to 18 months longer timeline, yes, but 37% higher IRR over a 5-year hold period, and substantially lower risk because we're not dependent on finding buyers in a specific market window. He stared at the projections. I could see him running calculations, looking for flaws. He couldn't find any. The math worked. "Fine," he finally said. "You've got 12 months, not 18, and if this goes sideways, it's your name on the post-mortem report." I should have recognized the trap, but I was 33, still believed competence mattered most, and genuinely excited about the work. The Riverside repositioning exceeded every benchmark. Within 4 months, occupancy increased from 61% to 84%. Tenant retention hit 93%, almost unheard of for distressed properties. The local business press in all 3 cities ran positive stories about Dominion's community-focused investment approach. 2 national real estate publications featured the portfolio as a case study in innovative property management. Most importantly, the numbers delivered. Revenue per square foot increased 42%. Operating expenses decreased 18% through efficiencies and reduced turnover costs. The portfolio valuation increased from our $87 million acquisition, cost to an appraised value of $133 million in under 10 months. I had turned a struggling asset into a flagship success story. I documented everything meticulously, prepared quarterly reports that detailed every decision and outcome, and presented updates to Arlington that he shared with the partner group. Then Harrison Whitlock entered the scenario. Harrison Whitlock was a legend in commercial real estate investment circles. 62 years old, founder of Whitlock Consolidated Holdings, a private investment network that managed over $4 billion in real estate assets. He was notoriously selective about partnerships, known for his methodical due diligence and his ability to identify management teams worth backing long-term. He'd been watching Dominion for 2 years, according to the rumors, considering whether to move some of his network's capital into our funds. For Dominion's partners, landing Whitlock wasn't just about the money. It was about validation, access to his network, and the credibility that came with his endorsement. When Harrison finally reached out to schedule preliminary meetings, the entire firm went into preparation mode. The partners assigned Arlington as the primary relationship manager, which made sense. He had the pedigree, the polish, the Yale connections that people like Harrison supposedly valued. But Harrison had one specific request. He wanted to understand Dominion's investment philosophy through a detailed case study of our most successful recent repositioning. He wanted to see the decision-making process, the execution, the full story. The partners immediately pointed to Riverside, and that meant Arlington needed me in the meetings. The first session went well. Harrison was sharp, asked penetrating questions, pushed back on assumptions, but I could tell he appreciated the thorough analysis. He particularly focused on the community engagement aspects, asking detailed questions about how we'd rebuilt tenant relationships and why I'd believed that approach would generate superior returns. Arlington positioned himself as the visionary behind the strategy. "I challenged Jasper to think beyond conventional approaches," he said smoothly, "to consider how we could generate alpha through stakeholder alignment rather than pure financial engineering." It wasn't true, he'd fought the approach until the numbers gave him no choice. But I stayed quiet, Corporate politics, pick your battles, my work spoke for itself. Harrison scheduled a second meeting, then a third. Each time his questions became more specific, more focused on decision-making processes and investment philosophy. He was clearly evaluating whether Dominion was the kind of organization his network should back, with substantial capital. The fourth meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late September. The agenda was straightforward. Finalize the case study discussion, address Harrison's remaining diligence questions, and potentially move toward term sheet discussions for a significant capital commitment. I prepared extensively, updated all models, prepared backup analysis for every assumption, anticipated questions. This was the meeting where Harrison would make his decision. Dominion's partners had made it clear that landing this relationship was a top priority. Arlington called me into his office the afternoon before the meeting. "Tomorrow's important, Kendal." Arlington was standing at his window, looking out over the city skyline. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "Harrison Whitlock represents the kind of investor relationship that defines careers." "I understand," I said. "I've prepared thoroughly. The Riverside story demonstrates our capabilities clearly." "Our capabilities." Now he turned. His expression was unreadable. "That's an interesting phrase." Something in his tone raised alarms, but I couldn't identify the specific threat. "The firm's capabilities," I clarified. "The success was a team effort." "Of course," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just make sure tomorrow you remember that you're representing Dominion Capital, not building your personal brand." I left his office with an uneasy feeling I couldn't quite name. That night, I reviewed my presentation materials 3 times, removing anything that could possibly be interpreted as self-promotion. I was representing the firm. That's what mattered. The meeting started normally. Harrison arrived exactly on time, as always. We settled into the conference room, the same mahogany table where everything would soon fall apart. Coffee was poured, pleasantries exchanged. I began walking through the final aspects of the Riverside case study. How we'd identified the core issues, developed the repositioning strategy, executed the plan, and measured outcomes. Harrison followed along, occasionally asking clarifying questions. 40 minutes into the presentation, I was explaining our approach to tenant relationship rebuilding when Arlington interrupted. "Harrison, if I may pause Jasper for just a moment." Arlington's voice had that tone again, smooth, controlled, like he was savoring something. "Before we continue, there's something you should know. Jasper here is being released from the firm today, effective immediately." The words didn't register at first. Released from the firm. Fired, me, in the middle of our most important investor presentation. Harrison's reaction was instant. He went completely rigid. His face, usually animated and engaged, became a mask. His fingers, which had been casually tapping his leather portfolio, stopped moving entirely. The silence stretched. 5 seconds, 10, it felt like hours. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing through possibilities. Was this a misunderstanding, some kind of bizarre test? Had I missed something catastrophic? The Riverside portfolio was performing beautifully. My other projects were on track. There had been no warnings, no performance discussions. Nothing that would indicate my job was in jeopardy. Arlington continued, his voice carrying artificial sympathy. "I apologize for the awkward timing, but given the circumstances, I thought transparency was important. We've decided to make some team changes. Jasper's approach, while creative, doesn't align with Dominion's long-term strategic direction." Harrison set down his pen. The small click as it touched the table sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I see," Harrison said slowly. His eyes moved from Arlington to me, then back to Arlington. "And this decision was made when exactly?" "We finalized it this morning," Arlington said. He sounded confident, like he'd anticipated the question and prepared his answer. "These decisions are never easy, but sometimes necessary for organizational clarity." Harrison nodded slowly. He closed his leather portfolio, a deliberate motion. Then he stood. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your time." His voice was perfectly neutral. "Arlington, I'll need to reconsider our discussions given this new information. Jasper, would you mind walking out with me? I have a question about one of the Riverside properties that's outside the scope of today's agenda." Arlington's confidence flickered. "Harrison, I'm happy to address any property-specific questions. As Jasper is no longer with the firm, it might be more appropriate." I'd like to speak with Jasper. Harrison's tone didn't change, but something in it stopped Arlington mid-sentence. Just briefly, I'm sure you understand. We walked out together. Arlington remained in the conference room, and I could feel his eyes burning into my back as we left. Harrison didn't speak until we reached the elevator bank. The hallway was empty. He pressed the down button, then turned to face me. Join my network. 4 words, quiet, direct, absolutely serious. I stared at him. I'm sorry, what? Join my network, Harrison repeated. Whitlock Consolidated Holdings. I'm offering you a position as Managing Director of Strategic Acquisitions. You'd oversee property identification and repositioning strategy across our entire portfolio. Full autonomy on deals under $50 million, partnership approval on anything larger. Compensation package including base salary of $380,000, performance bonus structure that could double that, and carried interest in the deals you originate. My salary at Dominion was $147,000. The bonus I'd been expecting for the Riverside success was maybe $30,000. I don't understand, I managed. You came here to evaluate Dominion, not recruit me. I came here to evaluate whether Dominion was an organization worth partnering with, Harrison said. Over 4 meetings, I've watched how your VP operates. He's claimed credit for your work consistently. His questions revealed he doesn't actually understand the strategic thinking behind the Riverside repositioning. He views real estate purely as financial abstraction, not as physical assets embedded in communities. The elevator arrived. Harrison held the door but didn't enter. What happened in that conference room confirmed my assessment, he continued. Arlington Gates saw you as a threat, your success, your approach, your relationship with me during these meetings. So he tried to eliminate the threat in a way that he thought would impress me, show that he makes tough decisions, demonstrate control. It spectacularly backfired, Harrison said. What he actually demonstrated is that Dominion's leadership treats talented people as disposable, that they prioritize ego over excellence, and that they don't recognize that I built a $4 billion portfolio, specifically by identifying and supporting people like you. I was still processing. You're offering me a job because Arlington fired me. I'm offering you a job because over 4 meetings, you've shown me exactly how you think. Your analysis is rigorous. Your strategy is innovative but grounded in realistic execution. You understand that real estate is ultimately about people and relationships, not just spreadsheets. And when challenged, you defend your positions with data rather than deflection. He handed me a business card. My direct line is on the back. Take 48 hours, talk to your wife. But Jasper, I've been doing this for 37 years. I know talent when I see it. What happened upstairs was Arlington's mistake, not yours. Don't let his insecurity define your next move. The elevator doors started to close. Harrison stepped in, then held them open one more moment. One more thing, he said. I'm withdrawing from discussions with Dominion. I'll be sending formal notice this afternoon. They should know that their approach to talent management has consequences. The doors closed. I stood in the empty hallway, holding Harrison Whitlock's business card, trying to comprehend how the worst moment of my career had transformed into the biggest opportunity I'd ever received. My phone buzzed. A text from Arlington. Return to conference room immediately. I took the elevator back up. Each floor felt like descending into battle rather than ascending. The doors opened. I walked back down the hallway. Arlington was waiting outside the conference room. His face had gone an interesting shade of pale that I'd never seen before. What did Harrison say to you? The confidence from earlier had evaporated. He had questions about property management, I said neutrally. I answered them. He's withdrawing his investment consideration. Arlington's voice was tight. His office sent formal notice 3 minutes ago. What did you say to him, Kendal? I answered his questions about property management, I repeated. Arlington stepped closer. You sabotaged this firm's most important investor relationship. That's actionable. I could ensure you never work in commercial real estate again. You fired me mid-presentation to impress him, I said quietly. How exactly did you think that would play out, Arlington? I made a strategic decision about team composition. You tried to take credit for work you fought against, then eliminate the person who actually did it before they could threaten your position. The words came out calmer than I felt. Harrison saw exactly what you were doing. So did I. So would anyone paying attention. Arlington's jaw clenched. Clear out your office. Security will escort you. And Jasper, whatever Harrison Whitlock said to you in that hallway, remember that he's known for making promises he doesn't keep. Don't count on anything. I nodded. I'll have my things out within the hour. The security escort was humiliating. Protocol for terminated employees, apparently. A guard named Ronald who apologized quietly as he stood by my office door while I packed my personal items into a cardboard box. Photos of Catherine and our daughter Emma. Books. A plant that had somehow survived my neglect. Physical evidence of 2 years at a firm I'd thought represented my career trajectory. Julie, Arlington's assistant, appeared in my doorway. Ronald tensed slightly, but she just handed me a folder. Your personnel file, she said softly. Performance reviews, original offer letter, documentation. You might want this. Thank you, Julie. She hesitated, then added in a voice barely above a whisper, He's done this before to others. It never sticks because he's careful, but people remember. She glanced at Ronald, then back to me. Good luck, Jasper. I carried my box to the parking garage. The bright September afternoon felt surreal. 12 hours ago, I'd been a rising analyst at a prestigious firm. Now I was unemployed, carrying office plants to my car, with a business card in my pocket that might represent salvation or might be nothing at all. Catherine was home when I arrived. She worked from home 2 days a week as a marketing consultant for healthcare companies. Emma was at preschool. You're back early, she said, then saw my face. What happened? I told her everything. The meeting, the firing, Harrison's offer. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger to cautious hope. 380,000 base, she finally said. Plus bonus potential and carried interest. And you trust this, that it's real? That was the question. I think so. Harrison Whitlock has a reputation. He doesn't make offers lightly. Catherine pulled up her laptop. For the next hour we researched. Harrison Whitlock's background. Whitlock Consolidated Holdings structure, news articles, industry profiles, LinkedIn connections, everything we could find. The picture that emerged was consistent. Harrison was demanding, expected excellence, but loyal to people who delivered. His network had minimal turnover in leadership positions. People who joined typically stayed for years. Several of his managing directors had become industry leaders themselves. Call him, Catherine said. Not to accept immediately, but to have the real conversation, understand exactly what he's offering and what he expects. I used Harrison's direct line. He answered on the second ring. Jasper, that was faster than 48 hours. I'm not calling to accept, I said. Not yet, but I need to understand what you're actually offering, why you want me specifically, what success looks like in this role. Good, Harrison said. Come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Meet some of my team, see how we operate, ask every question you have. Bring your wife if she's available. This kind of decision affects families, not just careers. We went together. Catherine arranged childcare for Emma, and we drove into the city to Whitlock Consolidated Holdings offices. Smaller than Dominion. No marble lobbies or designer furniture, but the energy was different. People moved with purpose rather than performance. Harrison's team included 4 managing directors, each overseeing different portfolio segments. Over 3 hours, we talked with all of them. They were candid about the work's demands, the pressure, the expectations, but also about the autonomy, the resources, the fact that Harrison protected his people when they made defensible decisions even if outcomes weren't perfect. He'll challenge every assumption you bring him, said Morgan Hartley, MD of Industrial Properties. But if your logic holds up, he backs you completely. I've never worked anywhere else where leadership actually meant support rather than supervision. The compensation package was detailed in writing. Everything Harrison had outlined, plus benefits that exceeded anything I'd seen. But more importantly, the structure showed how I'd be evaluated. Returns generated, portfolio performance, relationship quality with property management teams, long-term value creation rather than quarterly metrics. Catherine asked the question I'd been circling around. Why Jasper specifically? You've got access to talent from every major firm. What made you decide after watching him get fired that he was worth this offer? Harrison smiled. Fair question. I've been investing in real estate for 37 years. The industry attracts 2 types of people. those who see properties as numbers on spreadsheets, and those who understand that real estate is physical space where human activity happens. The first type maximizes short-term extraction. The second type builds long-term value. He gestured to the portfolio performance charts on his office wall. Jasper's approach to Riverside demonstrated he's the second type. But more than that, when Arlington tried to humiliate him, he stayed calm, didn't lash out, didn't badmouth the firm, just answered questions professionally. That's character. Character matters more than credentials. We left with a formal offer letter to review. Catherine and I sat in the car for 10 minutes before driving home. "It's real," she finally said. "This is actually real." "It is." "Then you accept. Obviously you accept." I signed the offer letter that evening, sent it back to Harrison with a start date 3 weeks out. He responded within an hour, "Welcome to the network. This is the beginning of something significant." What I didn't know yet was that Harrison had one more move planned. 2 days after I accepted his offer, Dominion Capital's partner group received a letter. It was delivered by courier to each partner individually and posted to several industry newsletters that covered private equity and commercial real estate. The letter, signed by Harrison Whitlock, detailed his evaluation process of Dominion. It described the Riverside portfolio case study in specific terms, and it explained exactly why he'd withdrawn from investment discussions. During the final diligence meeting, I witnessed Dominion's VP of Acquisitions terminate a talented analyst mid-presentation, apparently believing this demonstration of authority would impress me. Instead, it revealed an organizational culture that treats exceptional talent as disposable and prioritizes ego over excellence. Firms that operate this way may generate short-term returns, but they cannot sustain long-term value creation. I cannot recommend Dominion Capital as a partner to my network, and I encourage other institutional investors to carefully evaluate their talent development and retention practices before committing capital. The letter was professional, factual, and absolutely devastating. Within 48 hours, it had circulated throughout the commercial real estate investment community. Dominion's partners went into crisis mode. 2 other investor prospects withdrew from discussions, citing the need to reevaluate organizational fit. Arlington Gates was demoted, not fired because family connections still mattered, but stripped of his VP title, moved to a research role with no direct reports, and essentially sidelined from investor-facing activities. I learned all this through industry contacts, not from gloating. I'd moved on. My first day at Whitlock Consolidated Holdings was focused on learning systems, understanding the portfolio, and meeting the property management teams I'd be working with. Harrison called me into his office end of my first week. "You've seen the fallout at Dominion," he said, not a question. "I've heard things. I want you to understand why I sent that letter. It wasn't revenge on your behalf, though Arlington deserved the consequences. It was about standards. This industry has too many people like him. Leaders who succeed through performance theater rather than substance. I've spent decades building a network based on different principles. That letter was a statement about what those principles are." "I appreciate it," I said. "But I also want you to know that I'm here to deliver results, not because you rescued me from a bad situation." Harrison smiled. "Good. Then let's talk about your first acquisition target. There's a portfolio in Tennessee that needs your particular approach." Over the next 18 months, I developed and executed acquisition strategies that generated over $400 million in value across 6 properties. Applied the same community-focused repositioning approach that had worked in Riverside, adapted to different markets and property types. My reputation grew. Industry publications started calling for comments on repositioning strategies. I spoke at 2 conferences about stakeholder-aligned investment approaches. Harrison gave me increasing autonomy and larger deals. But the most meaningful moment came 14 months after joining Whitlock Consolidated Holdings. I was invited to speak at a commercial real estate leadership summit in Chicago. The topic was innovative acquisition strategies. Arlington Gates was in the audience. I didn't know he'd be there until I saw him in the 3rd row during my presentation. He looked smaller somehow. The confidence and arrogance had been replaced with something harder to define. Not quite humility, maybe just diminishment. I delivered my presentation without acknowledging him specifically. Talked about the importance of understanding properties as communities, not just assets. Shared case studies from both Riverside and my more recent work. Emphasized that sustainable returns came from sustainable relationships. During the Q&A session, Arlington raised his hand. The moderator called on him. Arlington Gates, Dominion Capital. There was a slight murmur in the room. People knew the history. Jasper, you've talked extensively about community engagement and stakeholder alignment, Arlington said. His voice was measured, careful. But how do you balance those softer elements with the fiduciary responsibility to maximize investor returns? Isn't there inherent tension? It wasn't actually a hostile question. More like he was genuinely trying to understand something that had always eluded him. It's not balance, I said. It's recognition that they're the same thing. Investor returns in real estate come from property performance. Property performance comes from tenant stability and satisfaction. Tenant stability comes from treating them as partners rather than revenue sources. There's no tension if you extend your time horizon beyond the next quarter. Arlington nodded slowly. He didn't ask a follow-up question. After the panel, I was surrounded by people wanting to discuss strategies, exchange business cards, propose collaborations. It took 30 minutes to extract myself from the crowd. I found Arlington waiting near the exit. Jasper, he looked uncertain, like he wasn't sure this conversation was welcome. Arlington, that was a strong presentation. Your work at Whitlock has been impressive. Thank you. Silence stretched between us. He seemed to be searching for words. I made a significant mistake, he finally said. In that conference room with Harrison Whitlock, I let ego override judgment. It cost me professionally. More importantly, it cost me the opportunity to learn from someone talented. I want you to know that I recognize that. It wasn't quite an apology. Arlington Gates probably wasn't capable of full apology, but it was acknowledgement. From someone who'd spent his career never admitting fault, it was something. I appreciate you saying that, I said. Are you open to staying in touch? He asked. Not as colleagues necessarily, but I've been trying to understand where my approach went wrong. Your success suggests you've figured out things I haven't. I considered. The petty part of me wanted to refuse, to let him sit with his diminishment. But I remembered what my father had taught me about empathy. Everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. Everyone deserves the chance to learn and grow. Send me an email, I said. I can't promise mentorship or anything formal, but if you have specific questions about approach or strategy, I'm willing to talk. Relief crossed his face. Thank you. He left. I stood in the empty hallway, processing the unexpected grace of that moment. Arlington Gates asking for help, being willing to admit he didn't have all the answers. Maybe people could change. Maybe consequences, sometimes taught rather than just punished. Catherine met me at the hotel that evening. She'd flown in to join me for the weekend portion of the conference. How'd it go? She asked. Arlington was there. Her expression hardened. What happened? I told her about the exchange. The question, the conversation, the request to stay in touch. Are you actually going to help him? She asked. Maybe in limited ways. He seems genuine about wanting to learn. You're more forgiving than I would be. It's not forgiveness exactly. It's just recognition that holding on to anger doesn't serve me. He's not my problem anymore. He's just another person trying to figure out how to be better at what he does. Catherine studied me. You've changed since leaving Dominion. You're more confident, more settled into who you are. She was right. The chaos of that September morning, the humiliation of being fired mid-meeting, the uncertainty of the transition. All of it had forced me to confront questions about what I actually valued and what kind of career I wanted to build. Working at Whitlock Consolidated Holdings had given me the space to answer those questions clearly. I valued autonomy over prestige, impact over title, working with people who saw talent as something to nurture rather than exploit. 2 years after joining Harrison's network, I was promoted to Senior Managing Director with expanded responsibilities across the entire acquisition portfolio. My compensation had increased to levels I'd never imagined during my Dominion days. But more than money, I had something I'd never had before, genuine satisfaction in my work. The properties I repositioned weren't just performing financially. They were actually improving their communities. creating stable employment for property management staff and tenants, providing spaces where small businesses could grow. That alignment of profit and purpose meant I went home each day feeling like the work mattered. Emma was 7 now, old enough to ask what Daddy did for work. I could explain it in terms that made sense to her. I help find buildings that need care, and then we take care of them so the people who work there can succeed. Like fixing something broken, she'd asked. Sort of, more like helping something that has potential become what it's supposed to be. She'd nodded satisfied. Catherine had smiled at me over Emma's head. You're good at this, both the work and the explanation. I occasionally heard updates about Dominion through industry channels. The firm was still operating, still managing substantial capital. But they'd lost ground to competitors. Several talented analysts had left. Their reputation had shifted from prestigious to merely competent. Arlington remained in his diminished role. He did email me occasionally. Questions about specific repositioning challenges, requests for perspective on tenant negotiation strategies. I responded when I had time and when the questions seemed genuine. Our communication stayed professional, bounded, transactional in a healthy way. Harrison Whitlock became more than a boss. He became a genuine mentor. Someone who challenged my thinking, supported my growth, and modeled what leadership could look like when it was rooted in principle rather than ego. On my 3-year anniversary with Whitlock Consolidated Holdings, Harrison took me to lunch at a quiet restaurant downtown. You know what you've accomplished here, he said over coffee. $470 million in value creation, 8 successful repositionings, a team that's learned from your approach, but I want to talk about what's next. Next? You're ready for the next level. I'm creating a new fund structure focused specifically on community-anchored commercial real estate. Properties in secondary and tertiary markets that need the approach you've pioneered. I want you to lead it. Lead it as in manage the fund? I asked carefully. Lead it as in full autonomy. You'd raise capital, source deals, build your team, execute strategy. Whitlock Consolidated would be the anchor investor and provide operational support, but this would be your vehicle, your reputation, your legacy. The weight of that offer settled over me. My own fund. The opportunity to scale everything I'd learned across a dedicated investment vehicle. The risk and responsibility that came with it. What kind of capital are we talking about? Initial raise of $200 million. Scale to $500 million over 3 years if performance supports it. You take a standard GP stake. If you execute the way I believe you will, this makes you independently wealthy and establishes you as a leader in the industry. I thought about the conference room at Dominion. Arlington's voice saying I was being released from the firm. The humiliation and fear of that moment. How impossible it would have seemed then that 3 years later I'd be discussing launching my own fund. I need to talk to Catherine, I said. This is a family decision. Of course, take the time you need. But Jasper, I'm not offering this because I like you, though I do. I'm offering it because you've earned it. You've demonstrated the capability, the judgment, and the character. This is the natural next step. Catherine and I talked for hours that night. The opportunity was extraordinary, but it also meant more travel, more pressure, more visibility. Emma was still young. We'd need to be thoughtful about balancing ambition with family priorities. What do you want to do? Catherine finally asked. Not what you should do or what makes logical sense. What do you actually want? I thought about it carefully. I want to build something, not just manage someone else's portfolio, even with autonomy. I want to create a firm that operates on the principles I believe in, where talent is nurtured, where profit and purpose align, where people like Julie, Arlington's assistant who slipped me my personnel file, would actually want to work. Then you accept, and we figure out the family balance together like we always have. I accepted Harrison's offer, spent 6 months developing the fund structure, investment thesis, and operational framework. We named it Cornerstone Community Capital. The name reflected the strategy, investing in properties that served as cornerstones for their communities, with capital that built rather than extracted. The fundraising process was intense, pitching institutional investors, family offices, high net worth individuals, explaining why a community-focused approach would generate superior risk-adjusted returns, defending the thesis against skeptics who saw it as leaving money on the table. Thank you for reaching out and sharing your thoughts with me. I truly appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you and help bring your ideas to life. Your input is incredibly valuable, and I want to make sure I address every detail with the care and attention it deserves. But Harrison's endorsement carried weight, and my track record spoke clearly. Within 8 months, we'd raised $230 million in committed capital. Cornerstone Community Capital officially launched with me as founding managing partner. The first property we acquired was a struggling retail and office complex in Kentucky. Familiar pattern: absentee ownership, deferred maintenance, antagonistic tenant relationships. I applied everything I'd learned. Rebuilt trust, invested in infrastructure, helped tenants succeed, created community value. 18 months later, the property had transformed. Occupancy from 58% to 91%. Tenant satisfaction scores in the top decile for comparable properties. Revenue per square foot increased 53%. Local economic impact was measurable in job creation and business growth. The financial returns matched the community impact. Our investors received distributions that exceeded projections. Word spread. The second fundraise was easier than the first. 4 years after launching Cornerstone, we managed $800 million across 12 properties in 9 states. We'd become known as the firm that fixed broken real estate through relationship building. Business school case studies featured our approach. I was invited to speak at industry conferences not as a novelty, but as a recognized leader. And through it all, I remembered that September morning, Arlington's smug confidence as he announced my termination, Harrison's rigid posture, the 4 words that changed everything: join my network. Success had come not despite that humiliation, but in some ways because of it. Being forced out of Dominion had freed me from playing corporate politics and pretending that someone else's vision was my own. It had pushed me toward people and opportunities aligned with my actual values. I saw Arlington one more time, 6 years after the conference room incident. An industry gala in New York. He approached me during the cocktail reception. "Jasper, congratulations on Cornerstone's success. The work you're doing is remarkable." "Thank you, Arlington. I've been following your fund's performance, the community engagement model you pioneered. I've tried implementing elements of it at Dominion in the limited capacity I have now." "How's that going?" "Mixed results. I don't have your instinct for it, but I'm learning." He paused. "I want you to know something. What I did to you in that meeting with Harrison Whitlock, it was the worst professional mistake I've made. Not because of the consequences to my career, though those were significant, but because I let ego override integrity. You deserved better." It was a real apology this time. Not hedged or qualified, just direct acknowledgement. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, genuinely. "You've built something important. A firm with actual values, not just value creation. That matters. I hope you're proud of it." "I am." We shook hands. He disappeared back into the crowd. I never saw him again, though I heard later that he eventually left Dominion and moved into teaching. Adjunct faculty at a business school, focusing on real estate finance. Maybe he'd found a place where his knowledge mattered more than his ego. Catherine found me on the balcony, overlooking the city. "Talking to ghosts?" she asked. "Something like that." Arlington apologized, really apologized. "How do you feel about that?" "Good, actually. People deserve the chance to grow. He seems like he's trying." She leaned against the railing next to me. "You know what I'm proudest of? Not Cornerstone's returns or your reputation, though those are impressive. I'm proud that you stayed yourself. You didn't become hardened or cynical. You built success without compromising the empathy that makes you who you are. That's what my parents taught me. See people as human first." "They taught you well." We looked out over the city. Thousands of buildings, each one containing countless stories, careers rising and falling, decisions reshaping lives, justice sometimes finding its way through the cracks. Somewhere in those buildings, young professionals were probably experiencing their own conference room moments, being undermined or fired or sabotaged by insecure leaders, wondering if their careers were over. I hoped they'd find their Harrison Whitlocks, the people who saw talent and valued character, the opportunities that came disguised as disasters. Most of all, I hoped they'd remember that being fired mid-meeting by someone trying to impress a client might feel like the end. But sometimes, If you stay true to who you are and someone recognizes your worth, it's actually the beginning. The client's forward reply, "Join my network." 4 words that changed my career, my life, my understanding of what success could mean. Arlington Gates tried to eliminate me to impress Harrison Whitlock. Instead, he revealed exactly who he was and exactly who I was. Harrison saw the difference. That made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced your own career setbacks that turned into opportunities, or if you believe that integrity and talent should matter more than politics and ego, help us build this community. We're working toward our first 1,000 subscribers who understand that corporate success doesn't require abandoning your principles. Hit that subscribe button. Join others who know that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something better. Welcome to the Corporate Vault, where the stories behind closed doors become lessons for everyone trying to navigate this complicated world of work with their integrity intact.